My name is Elise Morgan, and 6 months ago, I moved to the small town of Pine Hollow, tucked in the swampy, pine-dotted expanse north of New Orleans. I'm a surveyor, a job that keeps me outdoors, mapping land and measuring boundaries, often in the middle of nowhere. It's not the career you'd expect for someone like me, a gamer who'd rather be holed up with a controller than trudging through mud, but I love the solitude. No office politics, no small talk, just me, my tools, and the open land. I used to work in Baton Rouge, but new management shook things up, and those of us caught in the middle, too skilled to fire, too new to keep in the main office, were scattered across Louisiana. I landed in Pine Hollow, a quiet town with a grocery store, a diner, and not much else. It's rural, but not so isolated that I'm alone. My apartment complex has neighbors close enough to hear me scream, which, after what I've seen, I'm grateful for. I'm already planning to leave, though. Pine Hollow has shown me things I can't unsee, and I'm not sure I'll ever feel safe here again. The weirdness started the day I moved in. I was wrestling a heavy couch up the stairs to my second-floor apartment, a task I was woefully unprepared for. The 2 guys I'd hired to help me bailed at the last minute, leaving me cursing and sweating as I tried to maneuver the thing alone. The apartment complex is open air, with walkways exposed to the courtyard below, and a few neighbors milled about, ignoring my struggle. I was about to give up, ready to shove the couch back into my truck, when a voice stopped me, a deep, melodic voice with a thick Creole accent. "Need a hand, share?" it said. I turned, startled, to see a man standing behind me, dressed head to toe in white linen, a satin scarf tied around his head. His clothes were pristine, almost glowing in the late afternoon sun, and his smile was warm but intense, like he was studying me. I hadn't heard him approach, which set my nerves on edge. For a moment, I wondered if he was trouble, but his earnest expression disarmed me. I nodded, grateful, and with his help, we got the couch into my apartment in minutes. Inside, I offered him a beer from the 6-pack I'd stashed in the fridge. He accepted, introducing himself as Gabriel Laveau, though he said folks around town called him Gabe. We sat on the couch, catching our breath, and he asked about me, my name, where I was from, why I'd moved to Pine Hollow. His questions were polite, surface level, but there was a weight to them, like he was searching for something deeper. I thought maybe he was flirting, and I didn't entirely mind. He was handsome, with dark eyes that seemed to see right through you. But after finishing his beer, he stood to leave, his demeanor shifting. He turned at the door, his face serious, and said, "Don't go wandering in them woods alone, Lise. They ain't safe." His tone wasn't threatening, but it carried a warning, like a parent telling a child to stay away from a busy road. I opened my mouth to respond, caught off guard, but he continued, "I'm serious, Cher. Things out there, they don't take kindly to strangers." I explained that my job as a surveyor meant I'd be in those woods often, mapping properties and checking boundaries. His eyes widened, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "A surveyor?" he said, almost to himself. Then, in a voice so earnest it made my skin prickle, he asked, "Will you let me pray for you?" I froze, unsure how to respond. I'm not religious, but his sincerity was disarming, like he was trying to protect me from something real. I nodded, and he placed his hands over mine, his palms warm, and began to pray in a language I didn't recognize. Maybe Creole, maybe something older. His voice was low, rhythmic, the words flowing like a chant. It lasted longer than I expected, maybe 2 minutes, and when he finished, he touched my shoulder, his eyes locking onto mine. "Be careful out there," he said, then left. I stood there, staring at the closed door, a chill settling in my bones. That was the last time I saw Gabriel Laveau. He vanished, no sign of him at the complex, in town, or in the woods I've surveyed since. Pine Hollow's small, you'd expect to run into someone again, especially a neighbor. But it's like he was never here. It took me a couple of weeks to settle in, unpacking boxes and learning the lay of the land. Pine Hollow's downtown is just a strip with a diner, a pizza joint, and a grocery store, but it's enough. The surveyor's office here is bigger than the one in Baton Rouge, but my boss, Carl, prefers pushing papers to fieldwork, so I'm out on my own most days. That suits me fine. I'd rather be alone with my thoughts than stuck in meetings. But about 3 weeks after moving in, something happened that shook me. I was leaving my apartment one morning, locking the door, when I caught a flash of movement in my peripheral vision. I turned and my heart stopped. A massive snake, its scales a stark pattern of black and white, was coiled along the doorframe inches from my face. I screamed, stumbling back, nearly tumbling over the railing. It was a python, its body stretching the length of the door, thick as my arm. Its head turned, its eyes locking onto mine, but it didn't move, didn't hiss. I stood there, frozen, torn between terror and fascination, wanting to touch it but terrified of being bitten. I edged away, keeping my eyes on the snake, and ran to my car, calling animal control. Pine Hollow doesn't have its own officer, so I waited nearly an hour for someone from the parish to show up. The guy, a lanky man named Tom, was calm and professional, reassuring me that this wasn't uncommon. He grabbed a bin from his truck, but when he saw the snake, he whistled and went back for a bigger one. "This ain't no garden snake," he said, wrestling it into the container. He told me it was a ball python, not native to Louisiana or even the US, but a species from West Africa, likely an escaped pet. "They're docile usually," he said, "but this one's a monster. Probably someone's exotic pet got loose." My mind flashed to Gabriel, his Creole accent, his warning about the woods. The coincidence felt too strange, too pointed. Tom took the snake and left, but for days I couldn't step out my door without checking every corner, half expecting another python to slither out. I started noticing other things: big wasps buzzing too close, spiders in my apartment, more than you'd expect even in a rural place. I told myself it was just Louisiana, wild and untamed, but the unease lingered. Work kept me busy, which was a blessing. The Pine Hollow office had a backlog of surveys, and Carl was happy to let me handle the fieldwork. I spent weeks mapping properties in town: residential lots, commercial sites, easements for power lines. But some jobs took me further out, into the rural fringes where the roads turned to dirt and the pines crowd close. One assignment had me surveying a patch of land about the size of a football field, overgrown with weeds and dotted with crumbling sheds. It was a maze, the kind of place that makes you feel watched, even when you're alone. I was finishing the western boundary, my total station, a heavy, tripod-mounted camera for precise measurements, slung over my shoulder, when I noticed one shed with its door ajar. A flickering light came from inside, not electric but organic, like a flame. My stomach dropped. I'd seen enough abandoned properties to know that open flames meant trouble, vagrants, drug users, or worse. I'd put out small fires before to prevent wildfires, so I sighed and approached, ready to stomp out whatever was burning. As I got within 20 feet, a figure burst from the shed, a man, wild-eyed, wearing tattered red pants and no shoes. He hissed, a guttural sound that made my skin crawl, and sprinted toward the tree line, vanishing into the shadows like an animal. I froze, my heart pounding, unable to move as the image of his frantic escape burned into my mind. Then my eyes caught the shed's interior. Inside was an altar, cobbled together from wood and stone, covered in melted candles, feathers, and what looked like bones. A dead animal, a raccoon maybe, lay in the center, a knife plunged into its chest. 5 candles burned, their flames casting eerie shadows that danced like living things. I didn't think, didn't hesitate. I ran, my boots pounding the dirt, not stopping until I reached a road. I called the police, my voice shaking as I explained what I'd seen. They sent a unit out, and the property owner arrived, a gruff man who seemed more annoyed than surprised. The cops extinguished the candles and searched the other sheds, but they were tight-lipped about what they found. One officer escorted me to my truck, his face unreadable, and told me to steer clear of the property for a while. I didn't argue. After that, the weirdness followed me home. I started finding dead animals outside my apartment. First a beetle, then a sparrow, then a rat, its body stiff on my car's hood. I thought it was kids playing pranks, but the pattern felt deliberate, malicious. One morning, I stepped onto the walkway and saw something hanging between 2 railing posts. A small effigy, woven from twigs, hair, and some foul-smelling substance that made my nose burn. It was a voodoo doll, crude but unmistakable, with a tiny cloth face stitched with black thread. I screamed, loud enough to startle my neighbor, an older woman named Clara. who was heading to her car. I ran to her, babbling about the doll, and she went pale, whispering, "Don't touch it." She got in her car and drove off, avoiding my eyes. I called the police again, and they were sympathetic, taking photos and promising extra patrols, but they said there wasn't much they could do without a suspect. They photographed the rat, the doll, everything, but their questions felt rehearsed, like they knew more than they were saying. The animals kept coming. Lizards in my apartment, despite the air conditioning, birds slamming into my windows at odd hours, one breaking its neck at midnight. A massive spider crawled across my foot while I was deep in a Skyrim session, nearly making me yank my gaming rig off the desk. I caught it in a cup and released it outside, but sleep was impossible that night. I was scared to be alone in my apartment, scared to go to work. I told Carl everything, expecting him to brush it off, but he just handed me a 9mm pistol, a strange, old-fashioned revolver with a worn grip. "You're out there alone," he said. "Better safe than sorry." I took it, my hands shaking, and kept it in my work bag. I love the South, but damn, that was a first. Last week, things came to a head. It was late November, the air crisp, the wildlife mostly dormant. My company prioritizes rural jobs this time of year, when snakes and bugs are less of a problem. I was sent to a remote property, a wooded lot with a pond and dense timber, about 10 miles outside Pine Hollow. It was a long job, requiring hours of measurements, so I changed into overalls and sturdy boots in my truck, slipping the revolver into my bag. It was daylight, but the moment I stepped onto the property, I felt it, a weight, like eyes boring into me. I tried to focus, setting up my total station, but the feeling grew stronger, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. The woods were alive with animals that shouldn't have been there. Snakes slithering across my path, lizards darting underfoot, spiders dangling from branches. I told myself it was just nature, but my gut screamed otherwise. I was hauling my total station over a fallen log when I ran face first into a spiderweb. I felt the spider, huge, heavy, crawl across my cheek, and I lost it, screaming and swatting at my face. My bag slipped, the total station crashing to the ground. I scrambled to check it, cursing when I saw the lens cracked, the tripod bent. Those things cost thousands, and I knew it had come out of my paycheck. I climbed over the log to see what it had hit, and my breath caught. There was a structure, a crude altar of stacked stones, surrounded by glass jars filled with a yellow powder. Some were shattered, the powder scattered across the altar, my total station lying in the wreckage. I froze, my mind racing. Voodoo? Drugs? Something worse? Before I could process it, a sound tore through the silence. Laughter, high-pitched and unhinged, like a pack of hyenas closing in. It came from everywhere, above, behind, in the trees, mocking, relentless. I ran, my boots slipping on the damp ground, the laughter keeping pace. I stumbled, nearly twisting my ankle, but didn't stop until I burst from the tree-line, throwing my gear into the truck. I fumbled for the door, glancing back, and saw them, 6 black shapes, formless yet solid, lingering at the edge of the woods. They had no faces, no features, just shadows that seemed to stare right through me. The forest went silent, my breathing the only sound, until they spoke, their voices a low, guttural chorus. "Thank you." My blood turned to ice. I dove into the truck, turned the key, and floored it, the laughter erupting again as the shapes pressed close, their forms brushing the windows. I didn't stop until I reached town, the sound fading only when I was miles away. I drove straight to the police station, demanding to speak to Officer Daniels, who'd handled the voodoo doll incident. I spilled everything, the snake, the altar, the doll, the shadows. When I mentioned Gabriel Laveau, his face changed. He leaned in, checking the room, and whispered, "Gabriel Laveau's been dead for 5 years. He was a voodoo priest from New Orleans, a good man who'd helped people in Pine Hollow, but he'd been murdered, brutally, with no suspects ever caught." Daniels said the detective on the case believed a cult had followed Gabriel from the city, targeting him for his practices. I felt sick, my mind spinning. Daniels promised to investigate the property and increase patrols near my apartment, but his eyes told me he was out of his depth. I returned the broken total station to Carl, expecting a lecture, But when I mentioned the jars, he went quiet, his face pale. "Don't worry about it," he said, waving me off. I knew then he was hiding something, just like the cops. I didn't push. What could I say? "Hey, boss, is there a voodoo cult in town? I'm done with Pine Hollow. I'm packing my bags, ready to leave, even if it means debt or crashing with my sister in Michigan. The money doesn't matter anymore. What haunts me is Gabriel. Was he real? A ghost? If he was a ghost, how did he move a couch, drink a beer? If he could do that, what else could he, or those shadows, do?" His warning echoes in my head, "Don't go wandering in them woods." I didn't listen, and now I'm paying the price. I see those shapes in my dreams, hear their laughter, feel their eyes. I keep the revolver close, but I'm not sure it'll help. Whatever's out there, it's not done with me.